If you notice, some of you might have gotten a week or a an okay for organization, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about why that's so. So, when you think of your paper's organization, the main thing that you should consider is the paper's narrative. When we talk about narrative or when we speak about narrative, generally this deals with sequencing or how you sequence events following a particular plot. So in fiction, sequencing events in order to tell a story following a particular plot. Often in fiction, that plot is organized around a central conflict. So think of your short story and what you've been learning about writing short stories. Usually, not always, but usually the plot is organized around a central conflict or central conflict, because often it's conflict that drives the narrative and the story of a fiction piece. In an academic paper, it's also a little bit like that, although of course you're not writing creative writing, you're not writing fiction in your paper. But when you write an academic paper, it's helpful to think still of this concept of narrative, because consider that your paper is driven by a central problem. So, if in fiction, short stories are driven by a central conflict between, for example, a character and another character, or between a character and society, or between opposing impulses within the character himself. In academic writing, you are dealing with a central problem, and as we discussed before, that problem is encapsulated or articulated in the research question of your paper. So first, you have to clarify when before you write an outline, or if you don't know what to put in the outline yet, you can do a free writing exercise. Free writing is basically when you just sit down and write whatever comes to mind. It doesn't have to be good, it doesn't have to make sense. You just have to keep writing so that you get your thoughts out. So if you don't know what to put in your outline yet, or if you don't know what your narrative is yet, then do some pre-writing exercises like clustering, or when you arrange points or arrange topics together, free writing, outlining. What are other pre-writing exercises? Listing. So if you want me to speak more about how you can go about these pre-writing exercises, let me know next time. So again, when before you sit down to write your paper proper, do some pre-writing exercises, pre-writing thinking, and then look at the topics that come up whenever you think about your particular problem. And then after you've figured out one, what your problem is, what the central question of the paper is, figure out what are the most significant points that you need to discuss in relation to that question. So, main problem and then the most significant points that you need to discuss in order to clarify that problem. And I say most significant because, again, you only have a 6 to 7 page paper in which to write about these topics. If you try to cover everything, you'll end up not saying anything substantial about anything. In order to say substantial about something, you have to develop your thoughts about it. You have to provide evidence, you have to provide details. So think of your paper as a kind of architecture, like you're building something from the ground up, you're building something, and everything that goes into that structure has to serve something. It has to serve a purpose. It has to help build your argument. So if your argument is like an architectural design, all of the elements that you put into that argument or into that paper has to serve your design, which is also the narrative, which is like the narrative of your paper. So another way of thinking about your paper's narrative is that it is how you design your argument. So again, every single element that you put in that paper has to serve the purpose of the paper, has to serve your vision of what the paper is supposed to do and where it's going. But you won't be able to do that if it's still not clear to you what you wish to say. So ayun nga, writing is not just not just about sitting down and typing whatever. It takes a few days. It takes some time to process the information that you read and how you can synthesize it, how you can argue or engage with it, how you can articulate your understanding of it. That takes some time. So it's not something that you can cram. Okay, so going back to organization. So again, first, figure out your central problem or your central question. Identify the main elements that you need to discuss in order to clarify or answer that question. And then you have to decide how you sequence these things in your paper. So, one of the things that I put in the syllabus and that I kept repeating to you is that avoid headings in your paper. Headings are because this is not a hard and fast rule, but I put this rule because in my experience of teaching composition, a lot of students don't know how to do headings, how to use headings properly. Because when they use headings, they tend to use it just to like put different content in one paper, and then each type of content or each paragraph has its own heading, and then it's all mixed up in the paper. And the relationship between the paragraphs with headings is not clear. I don't know if that makes sense. Because when you put a heading, what a heading does is it's saying this is another section of a bigger problem. So you have, if we go back to the metaphor of an architectural design, if your entire paper is a house, each heading and the content that you put under that heading is a room in that house. So some students, they just like put put the headings and the content, mix them together in the paper, and it's not clear how these different rooms are connected or how they're related. Like, if I enter a house, do I go to the bathroom first or the kitchen first? Or if I enter a house, is it already the bedroom and then I go to the, I don't know, the living room? So when the tendency with the uncritical use of headings is that you are not properly guiding the reader into the house, into the narrative, into the story that you want to tell. You can use headings if it's clear to you how they are all related together and what sort of narrative, what sort of sequencing, what sort of experience you want the reader to get from reading your paper. But if it's not clear to you what your narrative is, and you just haphazardly put content together, then the headings just confuse, or yeah, the headings will just confuse your reader rather than clarify things for your reader. So what you want to do is to clarify for your reader as they are reading how everything is connected in your paper. Because sometimes, I mean, if you sequence your thoughts well enough, you don't need headings. That's one. If you sequence your thoughts well enough, if the reader can follow your thinking, your narrative clearly, then the headings, you don't need to put them there. When I read the paper, I know in the introduction they're talking about the problem, the background of the problem, the significance of the problem, and then they're also talking here about key concepts that they will explain for the rest of the paper. So if you sequence it well enough, you don't need the headings. Yeah. So again, just to recap again, main problem, the main. So one, figure out your main problem. Two, figure out the main parts of your paper or the main points that you need to tackle in order to clarify that problem. Three, sequence these points in your paper so that you come up with a coherent narrative that the reader can follow. The reader, again, does not think like you, so you have to guide the reader to through your thinking process, which is what you lay down in the paper. Number four, after you've drafted your paper with these, after sequencing things and you've drafted the paper, look at everything that you've written, and then for each thing that you write, for each sentence that you write, for each word that you write, ask, does this word need to be here? Need as in, does it serve my argument? Does it make my writing clearer? Does it make my point clearer? Does it help me um, move the narrative along? Does it serve a purpose of helping the reader transition from one paragraph to another? So you don't ask, does this help fulfill my word count? That's not the point. Reread the first draft of your paper. Look at every sentence, every word, every paragraph, and then ask, does this need to be here? If it needs to be here, why? What purpose is it serving in my art, in my paper? If it doesn't serve a purpose, aside from fulfilling a word count, if it doesn't serve a purpose, cut it out. It doesn't belong there. So all of the points in your paper have to be connected to the central question, and all of the points in your paper also have to be connected to one another. Okay. Um, so that's all I wanted to say about organization, and I'm meeting your classmate now. Thank you.